Okay, this video is brought to us by these guys are Agent Somethings, and he's rocking some hair here. I don't know if these were the good guys or the bad guys. These came after my time. So our author gives you a worked out example of how to calculate the standard deviation by hand, and it's somewhat complicated. And if you're interested in it, feel free to read it. Okay. I'm going to suggest that it's not that important that you know how to work it out by hand. What's important is that you know how to interpret it and which one to use when you're calculating a standard deviation. So you're going to use Desmos or Excel to calculate it. So I'm going to show you how to calculate the standard deviation for these four things using Desmos and using Excel. So the first thing is, like we did earlier, we could put into Excel a data set. I like to do it as A equals, and we do brackets, and then we type in our values with commas. Really, this is going to be better in Excel, but it's not terrible here in Desmos, right? Especially when the data set's that small. Note it says, hey, there's 4 elements in here. And then we can go under functions, and in the statistics, there's stdev. And then there's an stdev-p. Well, surprise, surprise, stdev is standard deviation of a sample. stdev-p is a standard deviation of a population. So I'm going to write those two things down in our notes. And you can see that they do give different answers. So we might need to ask ourselves, was this data set a sample or a population? And the answer is hard to say. It would depend on our question. Typically, you're working with a sample. Now, I'll tell you that when you work through the problems in ALEKS, most often, unless it's explicitly stated, they treat the data set they give you as a population, especially if there's no context. So they're wanting you to use the stdev-p. Although typically we don't know the population. Okay, so in Desmos, this is how it looks. stdev, that's the sample standard deviation. We use S for the symbol. 7.37 was the result. So what we're saying is the average distance that each of these data values was from our mean, recall that the mean from before was 64.25, is 7.37 pounds. Whereas the population standard deviation, that's this one, its average distance from this is 6.38. There's some theory of why there's a difference that, again, is outside the scope of this course. Let me show you how to do this in Excel. So in Excel, we would type in our values. So that's our 70, our 73, our 58, and our 60. And, excuse me, for population standard deviation, I guess I did sample first. So for sample standard deviation, you're going to do equals, you're going to start typing standard deviation, or stdev. And Desmos does stdev.s, which is nice. So for standard deviation of the sample, there you're getting, what happened? Divided by 0. I don't know why it's saying that. And then population standard deviation is going to be stdev.p. Oh, I know why. It's because this is treated as text and not numbers. Hang on, let me fix this real quick. These need to be numbers. Okay, so let's try this again. There we go. Oops, we want this to be .p. And there we go. Okay. So now we've got it. So it's just typing in that stdev.s versus that stdev.p and then selecting the cells that they're in. The mistake that was happening here is I had formatted the cells to be something other than a number. It was treated as a text, and it wasn't liking how that looked. Okay, so let's go back here and write that down in Excel. You would do equals stdev.s and then parentheses with your stuff. And for the population standard deviation, stdev.p with parentheses. Okay, so now we know how to calculate it. Here's what the formula looks like, which this is, you can see why we're not super interested in you working with it. You're having to take each data value and subtract from it the mean, and then square that, and then add together all those differences that are being squared. And then for the sample, you divide by n minus 1, which is the sample size minus 1. And for the population, you're dividing by n, which is the size of the population. So they are different formulas. Again, don't worry about the formulas. We're not interested in you memorizing them. We're more interested in you understanding that these numbers are telling us the average distance the data values are from the mean.